The change it takes to make the world.
Hi there, I am Carrie Ellis, author of 21st Century Superhuman, and this is our 21st Century Superhuman show. I'm here for part 3 with Peter Moon, who is an amazing author and cosmologist of some really interesting clues to history, maybe our ancient past, and we're going to look into some exciting things today. Peter, how are you today?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you.
Awesome to have you with me. I'm glad that on this planet we have this great technology where you and I can be talking to each other as if we're in the same room and we're far away from each other, so it's very exciting. So today we're going to talk about the Romanian language, which has some very interesting background in history, and you have a book that is on the topic we're going to cover today, right?
Well, the topic and the book are not on the Romanian language, but the Romanian language is a topic of the book.
Okay.
And what we will be discussing, because I know you had a special interest in from some of the points I brought up earlier. So, it's taken us 3 shows to get to this.
Yeah.
But perhaps I best begin at how this research was arrived at.
Okay, and first of all, let's just say you are an author, actually pretty prolific, and you've written about time travel, and you're currently doing some online videos on that people can tune into on time travel, and you've got really some amazing research behind you that you've been able to be part of. So
that's correct, and let me just say something about that. These videos, I anticipated releasing them at the beginning of this month, January of 2016, but as we moved into the retrograde and as things developed, I both decided and was forced to hold them back.
Okay.
I completed 7 of them. I'm working on the 8th now, and they will be released very shortly as we move out of the retrograde, out of the, what do they call it, the shadow period of the retrograde in February.
Great.
So it will be released very soon, okay. And they're very exciting what they mean. And these videos are explaining the theory of time travel, and they will also show the patent for the time reactor, which is an application of this theory. Now, where so much of this, and this ties in exactly to the questions you have about the Romanian language, because of course my introduction to what I'm sharing in these videos was learned first and foremost in the country of Romania, with sessions I spent, lectures I attended, and co-lectured with David Anderson, and also a personal tutoring session he gave me. But anyway, this begins, to answer your question about the language and also time is very much related to what we're going to say here. All of this stuff is intertwined. Now, I can't say when it was because I don't know or remember exactly. Well, actually, it was in the early 90s. After Romanian had, communism had fallen in Romania, the dictator, Nicolae Ceausescu, was, him and his wife were tried in maybe a 10-minute trial and shot. Summarily thereafter on Christmas Day, I believe it was 1989, and they had been involved in paranormal studies and projects. That's not why they were killed.
1989?
Yes.
Wow, that's recent.
Yes, that's not why they were killed. They were killed because they were they're the richest country in Europe. They were in the black, but the people did not get any benefit from this. And there was just too much lack of tolerance and killing, and there was a revolution started in the border town of Timișoara, which is in Transylvania on the western end of Romania, and it spread. And the army backed the revolutionaries, and it was the army who actually had Ceausescu shot. Now, this was a sort of a advantage for the other countries, or the what you call the world hegemony because they didn't like Ceausescu because he was independent. All right, and this would allow Romania to get Euro-sized. You know, like to Romanize somebody, to Eurosize them, to make them more like Europe. And they're already a lot like Europe in some ways. But they are the original culture of Europe. But in any way, to get to the part of the story, is there was a professor, an archaeologist in Transylvania, in the area of, what would the public know it as? It was in the mountain areas of Transylvania, where I have traveled to several times. Area in specific, Sarmisegetuza, which is the ancient heart and religious capital of Transylvania.
How would you like it if I screen shared for a second and put a map up again, and we could just look at where we are?
Please do.
Okay, give me just 1 second to.
I'll keep talking while you put this up there. And Professor Constantine was an archaeologist who was doing digs after the fall of the communist regime. And so there was a lot of digging to see. Now, here is Romania. And can you see my cursor or just your cursor?
I can't see your cursor, so I'll cursor around.
Stop right there. Go right above the O and go a little bit up above, right above the O, around the O.
Okay.
This is the area we're talking about, the O in Romania on that map.
Got it. Okay.
Right O in that Romania.
All right.
Okay. So right in that general area, give or take 100 miles, because was a I can't see my screen now.
Oh, you can't see your screen?
I was looking at my screen for certain information.
You're not seeing this.
I can see you and I can see me, but I want to see my computer screen.
Okay.
My computer screen.
Okay, let me take down screen sharing then. Where is Transylvania? Because you had mentioned
Transylvania is like if you go to about the N or I in Romania and go north, those are the Carpathians.
Okay.
And if you go around underneath Romania, you'll see a little mountain range. In west.
Okay.
The area above that little pocket in the mountains is Transylvania.
Okay.
It shows up better on some maps.
Okay. Let me stop the sharing, and we can go back to what you're looking at on your, but it's really exciting when you start talking about this. I want to see, okay, where are
now there you can see the mountains. You just see when you blew it up, it becomes much more expository.
And I can go back to that anytime you want.
Okay, so anyway, there was a Professor Constantine, and he was doing archaeology in these sacred areas. Of course, when you're doing archaeology, you're going to go where the ruins are. And there are many extant ruins in Romania. There are very many. So they were doing digs in this general area that I go to every year. Now, I since learned in my travels that Professor Constantine, and this all happened through serendipity and synchronicity, but I found out that he was indeed a real person. And that, yes, he did disappear, and that this story has teeth, at least as far as there was a professor who disappeared and told this incredible story. And the story is that one of the digs, he was staying with a family while he did this work in this particular area, and the son of the owner of where he was staying they were the last ones to go home, and they came upon this. They were putting tools away, and somehow they accidentally, where they were storing the tools, opened a hole. And they looked in, what's this? And they went in and looked around, and they found out it was like a big chamber. And the more they looked, it was bigger and bigger. I think it went to a bigger chamber, and it was huge. It was clean by reason of, I don't know why it was clean, but it was clean. It wasn't dusty, whether it was ionization, whether it was just the quality or state of of what was there, it went down a pathway. It went, I mean, like a long rolling hill. If you can imagine a football field that was like a long rolling down, slowly sloping, so that you could walk across it. And then he began to get to an area where there was golden ore. And the gold began to show up, a lot of gold. And then it would be mixed with quartz, which is not, it was not uncommon for quartz and gold to be mixed.
And tell me again, who was this and what time period was
We
this?
know him as Professor Constantine in the early 90s.
Okay.
And he began to explore with the young kid, and they went deeper and deeper until the quartz sort of disappeared and it was pure gold. And this is not gold ore. Now, this was a very significant find because in regular geology, you don't find gold like this. You find gold in relatively low ratio to the rest of the minerals that you find, so you have to mine it. You have to process it.
Right.
And this can sometimes be ecologically disastrous. But this was pure gold. And this was rarity, and there was so much of it. Now, this is one area of Transylvania. There's another area that's more famous called Rosia Montana. And Rosia Montana is, you know, hundreds of kilometers away from this. And it's a big entrance to underground caverns and whatnot. I've written a whole article on this, but this was, in Rosia Montana, was the subject of the biggest protest ever in human protest in Eastern Europe, because this Canadian mining company that was owned by a Jewish interest was trying to recover gold in Rosia Montana, and it was against, what they were doing was against Romanian law, and it was exploiting the government, because they told the government they were going to get 20%, but they were only going to get less than that, and the people were outraged about it. The government was not particularly outraged about it because some of them were in on the deal. They had a huge protest, arm-in-arm protest around this huge building. I think it might be the biggest building in the world. It's in Bucharest, the Capitol building, the parliamentary building that Ceausescu built to show how great his government was. Well, they still use the building. And they had this huge protest around it, and the Supreme Court of Romania ruled that they could no longer mine in this area. The Canadian company has vowed that they will overcome the law in some way. Now this, I've been told that this is a great, well, it is a great entrance to caverns, but a great entrance to the inner earth as well. And they wanted to use cyanide mining, which would have not only ruined the land, it would have blocked this entrance, and it would have done a lot of damage. And so this was a very destructive, but this gold was not as pure as the gold I'm talking about. I can't hear you, Cary.
Yes, unmute myself. Where is this compared to the Romanian Sphinx?
All of this, see, these two areas I'm talking about now are, you know, hundreds of kilometers away, no more than a, you know, hour and a half drive. But the Romanian Sphinx is in the Carpathian Mountains, and it's close, it's not that far in terms of as the crow flies to what's called Polinari Fortress, Polinari Citadel, which is the actual Dracula's, quote, castle, unquote. The Polinari Fortress is the real fortress that Dracula used, which is on the border of Wallachia and Transylvania.
Wow.
It was, now, that was to keep people from coming into Transylvania. And which he was the Prince of Wallachia, not Transylvania. And I know you want to address him later, but you can only appreciate him after I tell the rest of this story.
Oh, great.
We'll save him. But there is a popular tourist attraction called Dracula's Castle in Brasov, called Bran Castle. And this is not his castle. He didn't have this castle. It was not his castle. He might have stayed there for a few days, maybe. And they've turned it into a tourist attraction.
Wow.
And I highly recommend that people do not go there. The energy is not good,
Ah,
and it cultivates negativity, which is what the whole purpose of that. And there are other more sordid things I've heard that go on there. Don't really know. So anyway, the Sphinx is not far as the crow flies from these areas. It might take you less than an hour to drive south from that, say, the castle, not the fortress. They're in the Carpathian Mountains. So, like, say, if I was at where the Sphinx is, and I took the tram down to Bushteni, I might have to drive about an hour to the north and go through the Carpathians, travel westward a couple of hours, and then go north a couple more hours. It might even be more than a couple hours each way.
well, it's usually kind of roundabout when you're having to go through the mountains.
It's not as roundabout as you might think, except on the main road. So it's quite a ways in time.
So I'm going to ask you a question that may be off track and it may be on track, because I've put a lot of thought into the Anunnaki or the maybe ancient aliens or galactic, who knows who maybe was here mining gold for thousands of years and then building extra things. Do you have see any connection to any of that kind of thing?
I flush all that stuff right down the toilet personally.
Okay.
And this begins with the Zecharia Sitchin work.
Right.
I'm not saying that everything he wrote is not valid.
Right.
But when I began to read the 12th planet, as I was advised to do when I got involved in the Montauk research, it was incoherent, rambling, boring, and it was insulting, I thought, to an intelligent person, or certainly to a meticulous person. So I had to shut off. And every time I hear Anunnaki, I hear a bunch of people saying Anunnaki. Were there giants in Romania? Most definitely. But I don't follow this Anunnaki pattern of research. I just don't.
Well, I know that you're a really detailed researcher, and I love the material that you share with us, and so I kind of just wondered what your reflection was on that.
Yeah, I don't deny that there's Anunnaki or anything like this.
Right.
But I see information that is not correlated or coherent, at least from my own paradigm. What I'm very skilled at is knowing what to know and how to know it, at least from what I'm choosing to do.
Right.
So this, and I see nothing but like people pointing, Anunnaki, Anunnaki, Anunnaki. Well, there were giants in Romania. This is a fact. And if people want to identify them with the Anunnaki, that's their prerogative. It's not mine. Now, I also know that out of the Sitchin work came a lot of stuff about people being mined, people mining gold for the aliens and all that stuff.
Right.
And this, here we have a paradigm that's different. We have a huge gold repository within the earth that was not being mined by aliens or people working for aliens. It was being mostly kept intact, although the story I'm saying is far more interesting than any of this stuff that I'm trying to get at here, and that is, as this Professor Constantine was going into these underground caverns, they began to become pure gold. Now, pure gold is a facilitator of electricity.
Yes, I was just having those thoughts.
And when you go to the superhuman concept, which you work on, it facilitates superconsciousness. So
Yes.
the brain is surrounded by gold. It's going to think faster.
Interesting.
Now, I will tell you, when I was in Romania in 2014, we had occasion to visit the museum where they had, and then in the basement of the museum was all this Dacian gold, which was golden from the empire, okay? And it was a room of pure gold. I don't mean that the walls were gold, but there were all these cases with pure gold that was not only beautiful, it was a very high content of gold. Now, I had occasion to be in there with a sensitive, a female sensitive, and she's a good friend of mine, and we were walking around there, and she's an empath.
Mm-hmm.
And she just, all of a sudden, we're walking around, look at this, and all of a sudden it's like, woo, you know?
I'm
like,
getting chills with you just telling the story.
What just happened to you? You know, and I had to kind of just be there with her. Then, she was a Romanian woman. Then I had another empath who's arguably more of an empath, I guess an older woman and a much more accomplished with her gift of empathy, and who was with me at the camp. And she was there, and when she walked out of that museum, she began to stagger. We had to stabilize her on the steps, and we had to, I remember ran down to the corner and I got her a bottle of water.
Wow.
She destabilized, and that was the only incident we had with her the whole trip. She was very gung-ho, and you know, but I'm saying is this gold has a great impact on the consciousness. And of course, you'll first see it in empaths. The dense type of person will be affected by it too. You might not see it so obvious in them. So but this was just a room full of gold and jewelry. When you get into it surrounded by gold, or even in the area, because when you're in this area, it's prone to having orbs. So when you see photographs, I have photographs that were taken of orbs, you know, where you see over your head, over other people's head, in the forest,
nice,
whatnot. And so there is a facilitation of consciousness, a super consciousness that occurs in this area, and it's in the DNA of the people who've lived there for thousands and thousands, and who knows how many thousands of years.
I am just getting chills, and I love that you're telling this part of the story, because it feeds into what sounds like an incredibly deep and rich culture that is.
It's far deeper than will be appreciated. I know that this spring, I think it is, they're going to have a big New Age conference in Bucharest.
Wow.
It's all going to be about Amazonian shamanism, but it's all centered on drugs. And this is, well, of course, misdirect everybody. They'll be sitting there talking about how to take ayahuasca and make your brain go flutter, flutter, flutter. And they will completely miss out on this. They have all of these big speakers come into Bucharest, they come and they go. They might hear of the Romanian Sphinx and snicker, or snicker at me, or snicker at this. Of course, I'm not the author of the Romanian Sphinx, but there have been some they approach this with, not everybody, but they have a tendency to approach it with arrogance and stupidity, which most of this, there's a problem with this. So anyway, according to this story, as he goes deeper into the caves, he comes upon what can only be called a bed. And it's a bed because it's made of gold, and it appears to be a bed for laying down. And they take pictures of it, and these pictures were studied at different universities. And they conclude it's a bed because of the way people might have lied there. And you see the head sort of like, maybe they can figure it out with their analysis. And then there are hieroglyphics near, which were in an undetectable language, but they were able to, they had about 4 universities study it, and they all came up with this same basic phonetic interpretation of the hieroglyphics. And the interpretation is KR, I'm using the, our alphabet here, KR-IO, Creo, KR-IO, then it would say Salmos, SAL-MOS, and then it said, here is forever, the worlds unite. So what this meant, and this is, of course, an English translation of what it said. It says, Creo Salmos, here is forever, the worlds unite. Now, KRIO was interpreted, KR was first and foremost, was represented as being evocative of Chronos, Chronos, the god of time in Greek. And Io is a iteration of the divinity, okay? They have their own interpretation of it. It could also mean, IO can mean 10, 10, which is also an representation of the divinity, because this is why, say, in the word, in the Spanish, you have ocho for 8, nova, what is it? Ocho, nueve for 9, and 10 is diez, deity, diez. You see, 10 means God in Spanish, or phonetically. So you have Chronos, the god of time. And then it says Salmos, S-A-L-M-O-S. I don't think any of the university professors interpreted this correctly. It was a mystery to them. My translator and I both arrived at what Zalmos meant, because it's very obvious. It stands for Zalmox, Zalmoxes. Zalmoxes is the god, patron god of Romania. Now, anybody knows this. These Romanians know this. If they sent it to universities outside of Romania, they might not have appreciated it. They did send it to some universities outside of Romania, but certainly the Romanian, you can't miss it. Zalmoxes is a character who first appears in Western history by the Greek historian Herodotus, who said that he learned of the god Zalmoxes from I think they were the people along the Black Sea, if I recall. And Zalmoxes was a god who was supposedly a disciple of Pythagoras, who transformed from human into God. Now, when this Greek Herodotus, when he heard these stories, he concluded that it was the other way around, that Zalmoxes was the teacher of Pythagoras, okay? So I've actually been brought to a place in this area where I was told that Pythagoras walked along these steps. I don't know if it's true, but that's the legend.
That is awesome. What a great little nugget of history.
Well, yes. Well, see, there's more to Zalmoxes. Zalmoxes was a god who was brought into the underworld by a mysterious beings that are the indigenous beings or spirits of Romania, or Transylvania more specifically. And they are known as the Solomonare. Solomonare. It sounds like Solomon. And of course, it is like Solomon. And Solo is sun, and Monare, Mon is moon. The people of the Solomonar. The Solomonar. It is the people of the sun and the moon, but they are magical beings that will, by tradition, will appear in Romania as a beggar, as a shepherd, as a sheep. And one of the first things I ran into when I went to Romania was a beggar. And they look for money. And if you give them money, they're testing your heart. They're testing your heart.
I am getting chills.
Well, when I was first approached by the beggar, and he was a very unusual man, he didn't look poor at all.
Mm.
But this was in the Palace Castle in the city of Sanaya. And I didn't oblige him because I didn't have any of his currency. And the currency I had was charged to me for other people. I was the leader of a group. And coming from New York, I do not indulge beggars for the most part, selectively, because, you know, here in New York, they've had schools to teach people how to beg. It becomes an industry. Not that there aren't poor people who should be supported. So I learned this lesson, and I learned about the Solomonari, and that they're coming out of the woodwork to test your heart. The next time I returned to Pelez Castle, by coincidence, I sought out a beggar, and I gave him money, and he blessed me to high heaven. I mean, you could, by his intent. He was in bad shape, this man. And so when you see the beggar, now my tradition is when you treat this beggar kindly, he will open the heart of Romania to you. And if you continue to hear my story, you'll see that the heart of Romania has been opened.
Yeah, your stories are amazing. Let me just ask you really quick, is this kind of story you're telling in your book, or are we getting extra?
Yes, this is in the book, The White Bat.
Okay.
And also in this,
that book up?
The White Bat is my most recent book, which talks about, this summates all of my adventures in Romania. The Secret Parchment is where this Professor Constantine appears. And of course, I add more to it in this book. These two books are what we're discussing right here. And
that is so exciting. And I just want to remind people of your website. Peter, you're kind of creeping over to...
Okay, digitalmontauk.com. Digitalmontauk.com.
Okay, and we want people to go there and look for your work, because it's amazing and it's really wonderful. I mean, I think this should be reading that people seek out for this time. It's
well, yes, and the people can purchase the books at skybooks.usa.com, skybooks.usa.com, and the most inexpensive way to get these books is on Kindle. You can go right to Kindle and get these books, The Secret Parchment and The White Bat.
Great.
Of course, this is the 4th and 5th in a series, but you can start at any of the books when and where you want. The challenge of my work, it is all involved, and it becomes more involved and more dynamic as time goes forward. It's very much alive. The things I write about are alive, and they continue to have a life of their own. Now,
I know I'm wanting to go along in your suitcase the next time you go to Romania.
well, you can come next summer if you like. We can get you to the camp and talk about...
That would be, oh my gosh. I'm going to have to plan that into my agenda here.
Well, I will get very serious about it when the winter is over here. And I will be, you know, planning trips and this, that, and the other thing. Now, back to what I was saying about the Solomonari. The Solomonari are very important here because they will appear as, sometimes they will appear as a sheep or as a shepherd, and they will guide you. And you see that this tradition gets borrowed or amalgamated as civilization moves out into the Mideast. And you have this in the legends and stories of Bethlehem and Jesus, the shepherd. And you see the whole magical society of Aleister Crowley's Ordo Templi Orientis is based upon the shepherd kings, the ancient shepherd kings. Now, they don't recognize the shepherd kings as the Solomonari.
Wow.
And so anyway, these Solomonari, what they will do is they will test you, and if they find you worthy, they will take you into the underground, which is what they did with Zelmoxis for initiation. 4 years of initiation, he transcended into a godlike state. Now, in Romania, in the mountains, and this is, I've never been here, Pietra Neamț is a town in the mountains, and near there, they have, every August 6th, a great hologram of a pyramid appears. It's a result in the morning of the mountains in the shadow and the morning dew, and it will appear as a hologram of the Great Pyramid. It will mimic the size of the Great Pyramid. And this is supposedly in the tradition of the Orthodox Church in Romania, where Jesus experienced the transfiguration, where he became the Christ. You know, at the pyramid, where he appeared in the sky with Elijah and Moses. So this is you know, so a lot of the traditions of Christianity are borrowed from this ancient country. Now, it gets more interesting because Zalmoxis was initiated by the Solomonari. He emerged as a god, as the patron god of Romania, and as the civilization flowed out of Transylvania, and there's a whole reason it flowed out of Transylvania, because it was protected during the Ice Ages, and people all in Europe had to come out of this area. So you have the word Moses or Mushi deriving from Zalmoxis. You have, but see, Zalmoxis by tradition taught the Egyptians their religion.
You know, I'm going to toss out something that's kind of a little side note, but what's really interesting about the Swiss Indo collateral gold accounts, it is said that they are Solomon's gold. And I'm starting to like get a little bell going off in my mind that's coming back to this cosmology or this history.
We go back to Solomon. Of course, you cannot mistake the word Salmox and
right.
Solomon, or Solomonari and Solomon.
Oh, I'm getting chills.
During the, as the church, and I think this was more the Catholic Church than the Orthodox Church, as they had their influence in this area, they went and investigated and said, oh, these Solomonari, they found this name Solomonari. How do we recognize this? So they made up a legend that the ancient Hultan, which was also an indigenous name for the spirits of the area, that they said that they started calling them Solomonari. And the church fathers started referring to these beings as Solomonari. But this was actually a co-opting and a trying to distance this culture from the modern psyche, because they deny the name. This is the name. It
sounds like they had superhuman abilities.
It's based upon this, yes, based upon the sun and the moon. So anyway, Zalmoxis, the Solomonari, and Zalmoxis was also the founder of the Persian religion by tradition. I mean, you know, it is my personal belief, if I call it belief, observation, that Zalmoxis was a name that was based upon some ancient archetype and then was later transmogrified into various different characters that may or may not have been closely identified, just as you would have the name Caesar applying to all these different people. So would Zalmoxis apply to different incarnations of different people in ancient times. I don't think there was just one character called Zalmoxis, but it is ancient tradition, and it's also very obviously where the Yiddish word moxie derives from.
Oh.
They have no etymology for where does moxie come from. It's just a Yiddish word.
Interesting.
Now, the Yiddish are not uninvolved with this whole flow of culture and pattern, nor are the Germans, which is basically where the Yiddish are from. So there's a lot of correlations. Now, but when we get down to this, so anyway, I'm telling you that there is this hieroglyphics in this cave that say Creo Salmox, here is forever the worlds unite. Basically, this is the center of time. Now, I'm also wise enough to say if somebody says this is the center of time, it's resonant with the center of time. Okay, it's a strong witness to what might be called zero time, which could be at the center of the universe. Montauk was very similar to that, in that you could call it the center of time because it's resonating with core creation. Now,
so are you saying that the energy of the place or the consciousness of the place is holding this 0 point resonance?
yes.
Did it feel different to you to be there than to?
Well, now I wasn't where this very area was.
Okay.
But I have had, so we're talking about an area that extends hundreds of kilometers. And, where is what? We don't, if you go to Google Earth, you'll see that many of these areas are blacked out. You can't look at them. And so I've had remarkable experiences in this area, but I don't want to get off the topic and go into those.
Okay.
What I want to say here is that this now what's said in the book is it says that this hieroglyphics cannot be regarded by itself because it is intrinsically related to everything which represents and signifies the ancient origins of the Romanian people. And it says here, elements of linguistics are combined with the study of civilizations and cultures because they explain each other. So in other words, the linguistics, the culture, everything explains the ideas. It says the main idea underlined in very competent studies performed by Romanian linguists, out of which one is very special, is that the Romanian language is the primordial language, practically the only language in Europe. And I'm not talking out of a cheap or unjustified spirit, but from a perspective based upon references and studies performed by eminent researchers, which can only be contradicted out of bad will or ignorance. Now, what happens is you get into universities which have certain dogmas that say, no, it's this way. Now, almost uniformly, people who did these studies and set up a doctrine of this is the way history was, they don't even speak the Romanian language, so they don't even know what they're talking about. Okay?
Yeah, can you come back to you said the Romanian language is the only language that, and I kind of lost you there.
Well, okay.
Because I'd like to grasp the essence
Okay,
of it.
Is that it says the main idea underlined in very competent studies performed by Romanian linguists, out of which one is very special, is that the Romanian language is the primordial language, practically the only language in Europe. And when it says only language, obviously there are other languages than Romanian. What he's talking about here is the root language.
Got it.
Indo-European language, which used to be called the Indo-Aryan language.
Beautiful.
Yes. And they changed Indo-Aryan because of the Hitler thing. They don't want to say Aryan anymore.
Right.
It was an Indo-Aryan language.
Right.
So basically, what he'll go on and he'll explain, taking a word like a phoneme. He says Romanian. You will find what he calls as Romanian is an organic language. Now, when I say Romanian, I don't mean the original Romanian, the current Romanian. The Romanian of which it's based upon is an organic language which is based upon the phonemes of the peasants. And they describe things. And they'll take a phoneme like bore, which might mean like hollow, like to bore out something. Or it can even relate to a word like their word for belly, which will be bore. It has 500 words in the Romanian language, bore. The same applies with the root ma, M-A. And they have all these phonemes which show hundreds of words in the peasant language which evolved out of this one word. So if you go to France or you go to Germany, you go to Persia and you see these languages do not have all of these, they don't relate to one phoneme. They will, it's kind of like based upon a building structure of a language. So, and the peasants use these words, and you'll still see them in the peasant talk to a certain degree. Now, in a normal language, like say English, we're very far removed. You go and look at the definitions and you'll see this goes to this. Now, if you go to a Romanian language dictionary, it will seek to convince you that all these words in Romanian came from Slavic, came from Turkish, came from here, there, there. And he said, this is all a deliberate misdirection. Because if you do the more perspective, sober studies, you'll see that the language is much more rooted in nature and is organic to the area and is organic to the way people speak.
That's beautiful.
Now, case in point is in 1848, there was a revolution in Europe. They call it the Revolution of 48. And this was coincident with Karl Marx writing his Communist Manifesto, and which got started in a Jesuit community in Paraguay. But in 1848, there was a revolution in Europe whereby the Freemasons began to overtake the area. Now, simultaneous to the Freemason overthrow in 1848, well, was in Europe, was the assault on the Vatican, or the Papal States, I should say, the Papal States. And those were taken over, and it was finally the revolutions of Giuseppe Mazzini and Garibaldi, who resulted in the Papal States becoming the state of Italy. With the tri-standard flag, you have the red, white, and green of Italy. You have the red, white, and blue of France. You have the red, white, and blue of America. You'll see that most national flags are tricolored. The Romanian flag is
interesting.
Yellow, red, white, and yellow. Red, white, and gold. And so
this came from that 1848 time period?
Yes, and the Freemasons, they took Romanian scholars, they sent them to the Sorbonne in France and had them programmed, educated in what they wanted, and they came back, and out of all of this, the Romanian language was changed, but in particular was the alphabet. The alphabet changed from Cyrillic alphabet to the Latin alphabet. And they began to perpetrate the idea that the Romanian language came from Latin.
Now, what does Cyrillic look like?
Russian.
Russian, okay.
Russian, Bulgarian, those languages, the Slavic languages, are in Cyrillic. Serbo-Croatian.
It's just to toss in just a short thought. In my book, 21st Century Superhuman, I wrote about the Indo-Aryan time period, which is like 3000 BC, and then the Aramaic came through in about 5000 BC, and these languages kind of were emerged as a complete language. There wasn't like a growth of language. It was like there was almost a download of a language on the planet. And I know I've spent more time with the Aramaic, and I know the actual letters of that literally they're starting to believe they have a 3D energy, that they're not just a two-dimensional kind of written form of something, but they are a resonance of something. And I'm guessing the Romanian language is probably the same. And amazingly enough,
well, I would tell you that Romanians, some of them, can understand the Aramaic, and they can break it down because it would have evolved by this theory from the Romanian.
Interesting.
But, as I say, Zalmoxis is the forerunner of Christianity, and Egypt. Egypt's the forerunner of Christianity. Of course, you would see it in there. It wouldn't be, and of course, Aramaic is foundational to Judaism, to the language of the Hebrew. So, but you see that if you study the work of Stan Tenen, you will learn that there is one particular shape that's kind of vortexual in nature that would fit inside of a donut or a torus, and that the Hebrew language is based upon taking angles from this particular vortexual shape, and from 26 different angles you will see a shadow that will be that letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Now,
Oh my gosh, that is an amazing piece.
Stan Tennant worked at this through, and his site is the Meru Foundation, MERU. And he had I mentioned him in my book with his gracious permission in Pyramids of Montauk, whereby he understood pattern recognition. And he was reading Genesis and saw certain patterns. And over a period of years and decades, he's been working on this. He was able to figure this out. So he would also tell you that there are other languages that are sacred in this sense and that will have similar features, which would be, I believe he said, Arabic and Greek, at least. So, you know, these scholars of the ancient times, it seems like they knew a lot, but an actual truth is, it's not so much that they knew a lot from our perspective, they hadn't forgotten a lot. We have forgotten a lot, as opposed to their perspective is they hadn't forgotten so much. And they would preserve it much in the way you would leave a note for your husband or your wife if you wanted to say, well, this is what's in the refrigerator, throw this out, eat this in 3 days, do this, don't do this, you know, make sure you do the laundry. Whatever, it's in this sense. You're writing a responsible note to people you care about on what to do. And we look at things ass backwards and as a general population and general culture. So you have to learn. So when we go back to these hieroglyphics telling it this is the beginning of time, this is the time here is forever. There are, it should not be taken lightly because we're getting back to a root, not only of, we're talking about roots of language, we're talking about roots of culture, roots of civilization, and roots of thinking. And the thinking is very important. I want to say one thing is, in the time of Rome, they spoke vulgar Latin. This was a peasant language. The Latin language as we know it, as is done in the Catholic Church, which is the only place where it's preserved, except by maybe scholars, was a language for scholars. It wasn't a real language. It's a little bit like Esperanto, except that nobody really ever uses Esperanto, which is a made-up language for people who do not know. They tried to create an international language, but called Esperanto. But Latin was a language for scholars. It was not an organic language. It was not an indigenous language. So everybody spoke Romanian. They didn't speak Latin. The common person wouldn't know Latin. It would be like, you know, it was not part of the vernacular. So there's a lot of misconstruing of events, and then there's a deliberate misconstruing of events where they changed the Romanian language, they changed the alphabet, and they even changed some of the structure, I think around the early part of the 1900s. So people will tell you of an archaic Dacian, archaic Romanian language called archaic Dacian, which this is a touchy subject with certain Romanians who are very steadfast and arrogant in their fact that they went to the university and this is the way we learn things. Well, I learned this in the university, not understanding that universities are full of propaganda, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. So this is not necessarily, and the only thing I can say about universities have studied my books since I got involved. I've never studied their work. They study me, I don't study them. I haven't studied in universities. I've sometimes taken things that have been mentioned in universities, but as I say, they study me, I don't study them.
Well, and I think we're talking about the roots of, when you talk about organic language, and this kind of knowing of the reason for being, so to speak, or this energy, like talking about the 0 point energy field or the no time energy field. It's a knowing, it's a remembering of something that we we came in, I'd say, understanding, and then there's been these overlays that have happened over, you know, our cultures with whoever we call it, you know, wanting to kind of manage the human civilization and keep us separated from that, you know, that kind of eternal knowing that is part of the.
This is the whole key aspect to the superhuman that you're so passionate about, is that the human being is walking around in a state of ignorance, sleep,
forgetfulness.
Yes, and it is a dangerous state. It applies to the individual, and waking people up is dangerous. You see this in the story of the New Testament, where you know, the character Christ is waking people up, and it's pissing off, you know, the power structure. And this is, and then the power structure co-opts the idea and becomes a dictatorial, authoritarian institution, which is the opposite of the Christian teaching. And, you know, we have a bunch of ignorant and less than people.
Right. Hey, Peter, if you can move back over to the
center
a little bit. Yeah, thank you. It just, I think it cuts off the edges a little bit when I run it. So
in any case.
What you're saying is so true, and it's very well said. I'm really glad you're saying it. And I think we have a collective on the planet now that is choosing to wake up, that is wanting to wake up, that's maybe one of the bigger collectives in human history. And so, you know, it's one of the reasons we're doing these kind of videos and shows, is to give people more information so that we can have a reason to understand, why would we be waking up? You know, what are we waking up to? What is our ancient knowledge? And I just love it that you're a carrier of some of this information.
Well, this particular area we're talking about gets more interesting because I had the good fortune to interview Dr. David Anderson in this last June. And I was interviewing him mostly on his capabilities in time and his time reactor and whatnot. We're talking about this sort of thing. And I asked him about Romania because, of course, he's not only the one that brought me to Romania. He, I wondered, you know, what, if anything, he knew about some of the things that I've published and written about Romania. And at first he didn't want to talk about it. And then he came forth and said, well, we'll talk about it, but it's just between you and me. And then he talks about it in the interview publicly. And which was made me very happy that it was public. And what he said was, he says, you'll be interested into this. In the area of Romania known as Choclavina Cave, there was a huge discharge from a time reactor. It happened either 200 or 2,000 years ago. I don't know which. I guess they can tell by whatever methods they use, which are quite sophisticated. And he said, now, there were two remarkable coincidences to that. Number one, I was in this cave the previous summer, okay, which he found extremely curious. Now, I didn't ask to go to that cave. We had a day to travel, our group that I traveled with. We all went in a car. There were 6 of us, and then I had some other people that came with us. So we had, and then this archaeologist who I had met earlier in May, he rejoined us with his wife, and we had 2 cars, and he says, we're going to go to Choclavina Cave. I want you to see this. So, okay, I'll go along. It's a day to kill. You know, I have no other agenda. And this is where the time reactor discharged. And this is a cave that goes into 7 other caves. It's like some 7 kilometers long. Now, we couldn't go into the cave. I went into the front of the cave. And if I wanted to go deeper, I would have had to have, you know, boots to, you know, for the water and spelunking equipment. You can go to Choclavina Cave and look at it on YouTube. Cioclovina, I think is how you spell it, Chuklovina. And, so David was very curious of why I ended up in this cave. Now, this cave, as the crow flies, is not far from any of this area that I'm talking about with the hieroglyphics. It could be right amongst it. I don't know, but it's not far from the area. So when this says this is the center of time, here is it is related to, according to David Anderson, the discharge of a time reactor. So this is a synchronicity that is playing itself into my life, into my adventures, and demonstrating the importance of the area. Now, David had always told me, he says, Romania is very important because it's at the crossroads of the world between China and between the West. And of course, when I reiterated that to him years later, he was very impressed that I remembered that. Of course, he's not the only one who told me that. The professors are aware of this. Romania has a special place in world geography, let alone to say politics. We could make a case that the politics of the world are centered around this area. And this becomes very important because it's spiritually protected. And this is where you had asked about the story of Dracula comes into play. Dracula, of course, is a movie that people are familiar with from Hollywood. It's based upon the character Vlad Tepes. Vlad Tepes means Vlad the Impaler, Tepes. And it's because he used to impale his enemies on sticks and they would die in a very cruel way, so that when the Turkish army, the reason he became Vlad the Impaler was because the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, in conjunction with the Jewish faction, and they were going in to enslave the Christians, the Slavics, the Romanians. And they were invading Romania to take these people as slaves. Case in point was Vlad's brother, Radu. Radu, who was brought as a very young boy. He was used as a sexual slave of the Turkish, maybe it was the Sultan, and he was forced to perform these acts in front of his brother Vlad, and Vlad hated these people, and understandably so. And the Hungarian Empire, Austria-Hungary, was in charge of Transylvania. They owned Transylvania at that time. They were the occupying regency. And they did not speak the Romanian language. The Hungarian language is very different. And so anyway, they allowed Vlad to take back his father's seat and to fight off the Turks. And fight them off he did. And he impaled them to where they would be coming into to the territory to invade it, and they'd see thousands of their soldiers impaled on sticks. And it scared the living daylight. It doesn't matter how good you are, how many you have, it scared them. And Vlad kept the country safe. And to this day, he is their George Washington. He is their national hero.
And that's where the Dracula story came from?
The Dracula story comes from Bram Stoker, who was an Englishman who was part of a secret society there's a town in England, I don't remember it, it's on the east coast of England, where this ship came ashore, much like in the movie Dracula, and there was this whole similar problems associated with a vampire. And it was so sensitive that they moved the scene in the book to the south shore of England. I believe it's the South Shore. I forget the name of the town. And the story is completely inaccurate. Vlad is not from Transylvania. He's from Wallachia. and they have some geography is incorrect. But the story, it's a very well-written novel. It's a very good novel. And, of course, there was a lot of blood spilled. And what this story and Hollywood has done, and what Dracula did, the historical Vlad did, is he protected this area of the gold. The Hungarians never seemed to bother it. The Romans plundered it. I don't know that the Hungarians plundered it. They didn't seem to, if they did take the gold, they didn't take enough of it to significantly damage the area. Mm. So what happened here was Vlad the Impaler acted as an agent of buffer, acted as a buffer, and he buffered this whole area and protected it, wittingly or not. He didn't. And this has kept the Ottomans, who would have ostensibly invaded it and gone for the gold.
And what time period was this?
1400s.
Neat. Amazing history. Very cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of how Dracula fits in. The other thing is he is an amazing side tunnel. People want to go to Romania, they'll side tunnel right into Dracula because this is what they've been programmed with from Hollywood. And it appeals to their lowest common denominator, which is bloodlust. And some sort of, it's the story is a psychic vampirism in and of itself. Because the person, I've read stories of people that they go over to Romania, they want to figure what this is all about, this Dracula myth. They don't even come close to understanding. They might understand that he was a real person. And they might go into there's a whole sinister side of that people can be attracted to over there.
Right. Well, it's good. It's just good to have you kind of tell us the real story and debunk that a little bit, because we know that our modern world is filled with programming that gets us distracted from what we should really be paying attention to.
Well, I would also tell you that some of the negative stuff is very real indeed. So if people want to go over there and think they're part of some, sinister bloodline or royal bloodline, and, there's a whole bunch of crap that was perpetrated about that. And these secret societies do exist.
Right.
But it's like...
well, and I think we find when there's powerful places on the earth, those can be used both for good and for evil, so to speak. I mean, if there's people wanting to siphon energy and use it to ill intent, sometimes they choose those kind of powerful places.
Well, yes, and what it is, it's like if you were to go back in time and say, I want to go to Solomon's temple. And instead of going to Solomon's temple, you say, well, where did the priests go to the bathroom? They show you they went over there, and you go and you put your head right in it. And this is essentially what people will do in Romania, if they're not oriented otherwise.
Right.
Put their heads right in the proverbial toilet when they could be checking out the more esoteric aspects.
Nice. Well, it's really great to hear this story from you and kind of hear hear some of the real essence of what's over there. Do we want to come to a close here?
We don't have to.
Okay. I love your story, so if you want to go on, continue on with the journey.
Well, we did reach at sort of a nice place there, a nice stopping point. But what I would say, what's most important here, and people can read the book, or books if they want to become more educated on this particular aspect. But I gave a lecture on this locally on Long Island at a facility that I've lectured at over the years. And, it was very interesting. I had a slideshow prepared. I had lectured to them a couple of years ago about Montauk. And I had a PowerPoint presentation. And that was all well and fine. I was going to Romania practically the next day. This time, 2 years later, I had a slideshow of Romania, because I talked about Montauk the time before. And people were very moved. I never saw an audience so moved, because I usually don't do pictures when I talk. But I was showing them all the sites of Romania, and all these people want to go. Oh, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go. Yeah, I've never heard this before, as opposed to if I talked about it. And if we could have been differently prepared, I could have shown slides. But what's more important here than any more of the data I had to share is that this land is a land of magic. It's a land of enchantment, but it's going to be unnoticed by many. And you have to have a deep appreciation, not only for the legends and the stories, but the people themselves, and more importantly, the spirits themselves, which do live in the people. So when I met this archaeologist who took me to the Transylvania cave, I met him in May. He was amazed to hear many of my stories, because he had not read these books. They correlated with many of the things he knew as an archaeologist. And it was very clear after talking to me that if I spent years in this valley, the Valley of the Golden Thrones, and got to know people and got them to talk, they'd come out of the woodwork and tell me all sorts of incredible stories that normally they might not talk about. He might say, well, there's a cave that they know about, but it's been blocked up for 200 years because so-and-so's ancestor died in it, and they blocked it up and they never opened it. And this is part of the family story. So you have all of these stories, and I'm not going to be spending my time mining more stories. I could do this forever. And what would I really have to show for it other than a lot of interesting stories? Well, I already have a lot of interesting stories. But to feel the land, to feel the spirits, because these spirits were initiators into the superhuman state. And it's for this reason that you might want to consider going there, just out of the feelings you get for it. And this is like when I would travel there in the Sphinx area to a place called Omu, which means the Mount of Humanity, Mountain of Humanity. This was a 3-hour hike from the Sphinx. And then you stay in a cabin overnight, and it's very cold. And then I had dreams there. And I was dreaming of names of the lady who would be my host in the hotel. Her parents actually owned the hotel, but she was the facilitator. So like we have a very close, bizarre friendship. I'm dreaming of this woman and this role she's going to play in my life, based upon a friend I had in grade school by the similar name. I'm dreaming of this friend. Why am I dreaming of this friend? And I'm dreaming of, I dreamt a lot of presidents and the connection of presidents. So there's always this odd presidential vibe I have when I go to Romania. 2 of my friends in Romania have been sought out and inquiries placed if they would run for president. I don't know that either one of them will, but I had another case where I arrived in Bucharest in May of 2014 in this huge storm. And they said, this storm was very unprecedented the way it was. I was met and taken out, and I was met by a general of the army and taken to my destination. And she said that the Vice President Biden is following you. The Vice President and the CIA Director. Now, I saw on the news later that the CIA Director and the Vice President Biden were literally following me into the country. And they were opening up the biggest particle accelerator in the world in Transylvania. And it was announced on the Romanian news, but you will see no comment of it. I finally found a comment on it on the website of Joseph Farrell, on his website about the Transylvania particle accelerator. That's the only comment I could find.
Wow.
Was on his website, which was all speculative, but at least he mentioned it, And what was this particle accelerator doing? And of course, at the same time, my friend David Anderson was expressing his displeasure at his friend in Romania about why he's not responding in time for the camp, because we're preparing for the camp. And I wrote to David and I said, well, you know, we've got the vice president here and we've got the CIA director, and our friend is in charge of nuclear security.
Wow.
So he's got his hands full.
Yeah.
And I wanted to meet with him. I wasn't able to meet with him because he's got his hands full with the vice president. So I said, no, this is why he can't talk to you. And the only reason I knew it was because of the news. So you see that, and then I was told at the camp, at the hotel that I stay at, I said, I noticed that there are now outhouses near the sacred area, Sarmisegetuza. I said, when I first went there, you had to go in the woods. I said, how did these this is so nice that the outhouses are there. Because you're in the woods. She says, well, yes. I said, how did they get, what happened? She says, well, she said the ambassador, the American ambassador was visiting. And he stayed at our hotel because it's, probably the nicest place to stay. And he had his wife, and his wife was reading your books. And they got to that area and they complained that there were no toilets. And the Romanian government's response was to put up these outhouses. So it's like I've had she wanted to see the sights. It was an indirect effect. So I get into a funny area. I also met one of the top politicians in Romania on one time when I was there, and he wanted to have dinner with me. He invited me to his table, and he couldn't believe that, how could all this stuff happen in Romania when, he says, I haven't heard about it. And I would have signed off on the budget for it. And I said, well, the budget doesn't come from the government. And he was also the head of a literary society. How could I not know about these books? And of course, my sponsor there says, oh, well, I found out about these books in Peru. They're known around the world.
Wow.
Yeah, so in other words, people are very, and the reason I met the politician was because I was with his wife in a sacred cave we were trying to find, and I happened to be spending this time in the cave, and I kind of twigged. I said, you're kind of a famous woman in Romania, aren't you? She says, well, yeah. And then I found out that her husband was more famous than she was. Mm. So, it's like, when you go to this, I go to this area, I have interesting connections, feeling where the vibration of not only the earth is, but the politics and the people.
Yeah, it seems like there's a really big magnetic because of the two are kind of coalescing with each other. Well, Peter, you've revealed a lot of really fascinating information today. And I always feel like this kind of information, I actually had this thought come to me when I was writing my book, and I hadn't heard Michael Tellinger say it, but Michael Tellinger commonly says, and I said for a long time, we're in the middle of figuring out who we are, why we're here, and where we're going. And I think this is part of the 21st century superhuman journey of waking up. And I think grasping some of this really exciting knowledge about, special places on the planet, this very special place, and the history that you've become privy to because of your research, and then even the connections with the whole concept of time travel, 0 point. We're looking at some really awesome stuff here. So
we have to get you to Romania and teach your concept of the superhuman, because these basically young people are very open. And when I bring people, even if I bring a person without the purpose of them giving a presentation, and they'll say, oh, we have all our presentations full. When they get there, they say, well, what can this person teach us? It's inevitable. They want to learn.
My book was actually translated into Hungarian this year, which I know is not Romanian, but that's a big leap for me.
It's not far away. The country is not far away.
Right. I'm excited about that. So You know, I think we could probably do ongoing chapters of this. Let's just see what happens, and if we feel like we want to do another segment. And really, wherever I travel, I have people ask, hey, can I go with you? You know, so you never know. I mean, I could bring a handful of people to Romania next year, and we could have an adventure over there. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time in your busy schedule to be present with us today. And I feel really privileged to be in this dialogue with you. And I'd like to let people know again how they can find you, how they can find your current material, and we'll put it in the links under the video and at the blog post at Naturally Better TV. But go ahead.
The books are skybooks.usa.com, skybooks.usa.com, and then you can go to digitalmontauk.com, which is the blog.
Excellent. And Montauk is M-O-N?
Montauk.
Perfect.
If you look up Peter Moon, Transylvania, Montauk on YouTube, you can, listen to me talk for hours and hours and hours.
Right. Awesome. Thank you so much for being a thought leader here in our culture today, and following your passion, following your heart, and revealing all this great information to us.
Thank you, Cary.
I want to thank all of our listeners, and much love to you all. Many blessings. Keep waking up, keep learning, keep growing, and listen to your heart and play your own role in this magnificent unfolding journey on planet Earth as we move into a wiser, more intelligent civilization. All right. Many blessings all. Adios, Peter.
Thank you.